Emily Carter, 32, had always believed in the idea of a peaceful marriage. She imagined mornings with laughter over coffee, quiet evenings with shared conversation, and a home that felt warm and safe. When she married Daniel Carter, 35, 2 years ago, she thought her dreams had come true. He was kind, soft-spoken, and steady, a man who never raised his voice and never made hasty decisions. At least, that's what she believed. The trouble began the day she moved into Daniel's family home. The house was an elegant, 2-story suburban home in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio, complete with a small garden in the backyard and a white picket fence. It smelled faintly of polished wood and cinnamon, probably from the morning coffee Maggie Carter, Daniel's mother, brewed each day. Emily carried her suitcase into the foyer, her heart full of hope and excitement. She was ready to start a new chapter her first day as Daniel's wife, living under the same roof as his family. Maggie, 58, appeared almost immediately. She stood in the hallway, hands on her hips, scrutinizing Emily from head to toe with sharp eyes. Her short, silver-streaked hair framed a face that could have been soft, if not for the permanent line of judgment etched across her brow. Maggie said, raising an eyebrow. "You're thinner than I expected. Women who are too thin can't handle a household property." Emily froze, her lips pressed together. She glanced at Daniel, hoping he would say something, anything. He didn't. Not a word. Emily swallowed and forced a small smile. "I'll do my best," she said softly. Maggie didn't respond. Instead, she nodded once, almost as if she were satisfied for the moment, and turned to the kitchen. Over the next few weeks, Emily discovered that Maggie had a particular style of living, one that left no room for compromise. She would criticize the way Emily cooked, how she cleaned, the way she folded towels, even the way she arranged silverware in the drawers. "You're stacking the plate wrong," Maggie would snap, leaning over her shoulder in the kitchen. "A man notices these things, Emily. Even Daniel notices. You'll want to do it my way." Daniel stood quietly by the doorway watching, saying nothing. He would lower his eyes when Emily looked at him, his silence almost unbearable. "Just let it go," he whispered once, when she sat on the couch after another heated comment from Maggie. "Let it go, let it go, let it go." Those words became chains around Emily's heart. Every insult, every judgment, every petty remark, Emily swallowed like bitter medicine because Daniel, the man she loved, refused to defend her. Weeks turned into months. Emily tried harder. She cooked elaborate meals that took hours. She woke up early every morning, vacuumed the house, organized every closet, and even ironed Daniel's shirts meticulously. She smiled more, tried to laugh softly, and waited for some sign that Daniel would notice her effort and finally take a stand. But Daniel remained silent. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Emily suggested they go for a walk, just the two of them, in the cool evening air, to talk, to breathe, to feel something other than the suffocating tension of the house. Maggie's sharp voice cut through the hallway like a whip. "Why do you need to take him out? Can't he rest here? Or are you trying to keep him away from his mother?" Emily froze. Her chest tightened. Daniel didn't say a word. That night, she cried herself to sleep in the guest room, tears burning her cheeks and staining the pillow. She felt invisible, trapped, and humiliated. And in that moment, she realized something heartbreaking. Her marriage wasn't breaking because of Maggie's cruelty alone. It was breaking because the man she loved, the man who had promised to protect her, stood by silently while she suffered. The next morning, Emily sat quietly at the breakfast table, staring at her untouched coffee. Maggie hovered nearby, criticizing the way she poured cream into her mug. "You always spill it," Maggie said sharply. "It's messy. You'll have to do better." Emily didn't answer. She didn't even look at her mother-in-law. She just focused on her cup, trying to steady her breathing. Daniel was reading the newspaper, seemingly unaware of the emotional war raging just a few feet away. Weeks passed, and the emotional oppression worsened. Maggie began making decisions that directly affected Emily and Daniel's life without consulting them. She decided what Emily should cook for dinner, which holidays they would visit Emily's parents, and even which friends they were allowed to invite over. She dictated Daniel's schedule, insisting he come home early from work, so she could spend time with her son. Emily's own desires and plans were irrelevant. One afternoon, Emily mentioned she wanted to take a weekend trip with Daniel, to celebrate their anniversary quietly. Maggie reacted as though she had suggested a crime. "A weekend trip? You want to take him away from me? He's my son," Maggie said, her voice sharp, eyes flashing. "What do you even plan to do out there? You'll just ruin the furniture and come back exhausted." Daniel remained quiet, staring at his coffee cup, shoulders slumped. Emily felt her heart break in a way it hadn't since the day she learned her father was seriously ill years ago. The silence screamed louder than any insult. Then came the pressure about children. Emily had suffered a miscarriage months before their anniversary. She hadn't told anyone except Daniel, and he had promised to keep it private. "You've been married for 2 years, Maggie snapped one evening, standing in the doorway of their bedroom. "Still no child. What do you even do all day?" Emily froze, her stomach twisted into knots. She had wanted to tell Maggie nothing. Protect herself, protect Daniel, protect their privacy, but Maggie's words cut through the house like knives. Daniel looked at her, then down at the floor. Not a word. That night, Emily sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. She looked at Daniel, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't do this anymore." He didn't answer. He just lay back, staring at the ceiling. And in that moment, Emily realized that staying silent in her own home, enduring her mother-in-law's domination while her husband refused to defend her, was slowly killing her spirit. Her frustration built like a storm. She felt anger, despair, and heartbreak all at once. She loved Daniel, but she loved herself more. Something had to change. The first step, she realized, was recognizing the truth. Her life, her marriage, and her happiness could not survive if Daniel continued to stay silent. It was a painful realization, but it was also freeing. For the first time in months, Emily felt a flicker of control. She could not change Daniel or his mother, but she could reclaim herself. And that, she decided, was exactly what she would do. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A beginning that would not be dictated by Maggie Carter, her overbearing mother-in-law, or by the quiet man who watched from the sidelines. Emily Carter was about to take the first step toward reclaiming her life. And this time, she would not let silence win. Emily didn't cry the next morning. She didn't argue. She didn't even acknowledge Maggie's sharp, judgmental remarks over breakfast. Instead, she moved quietly through the house, her mind whirling with thoughts of escape, self-preservation, and reclaiming her dignity. She had tried everything: patience, compromise, humor, even tears. Nothing worked. Maggie's domination had grown stronger over time, and Daniel's silence had become unbearable, almost like a betrayal. Every day, he had watched Emily suffer while he remained motionless, afraid perhaps of his mother, or maybe afraid of confrontation. Either way, silence had become a weapon, one that slowly destroyed Emily's spirit. That morning, Emily made a decision. She would not wait for Daniel to act. She would take the first step herself. She told herself it wasn't revenge yet. It was survival. After dropping Daniel at work, she drove to a small legal office in the heart of Columbus. The receptionist greeted her warmly, and Emily explained her situation to a lawyer named Laura Bennett, a professional in family and domestic law. Laura listened carefully, nodding as Emily poured out her story: the years of subtle emotional abuse from her mother-in-law, the relentless domination, and the quiet complicity of her husband. Emily described Maggie's interference in their finances, personal choices, and social life. She mentioned the miscarriage and the crushing pressure to have children, despite her emotional and physical state. "Emily," Laura said finally, her voice calm but firm, "what you're describing is a pattern of emotional abuse, and you have every right to protect yourself legally. There are ways to reclaim your autonomy, your safety, and your life." Hearing those words felt like a small miracle. For months, Emily had felt trapped, powerless, and silenced. Now, someone validated her feelings. Someone said she had the right to act. Over the next week, Emily worked closely with Laura. They documented every incident: text messages, emails, financial statements, notes on Maggie's intrusions, even photographs of the home showing areas rearranged without consent. Each piece built a picture of control and abuse, of a woman who ruled her son's household like a tyrant, and a husband who remained mute while his wife suffered. Meanwhile, at the Carter house, life continued under Maggie's strict regimen. She decided what Daniel should eat when he should work, and which friends he could see. Emily had always been quiet, but Daniel had learned to take her silence for granted. Every order Maggie gave him, he obeyed. Every insult he witnessed toward his wife, he allowed. Emily's absence became immediately noticeable. Maggie complained loudly to neighbors about how Daniel was weak and incapable of managing their household. She framed Emily's leaving as a personal failure, but Daniel's silence now had a weight Emily hadn't noticed before, a responsibility he could not escape. After several days, Daniel finally visited Emily's parents' house, appearing anxious, tense, and unsure. Emily met him in the living room, her eyes calm but guarded. "Emily, why did you leave?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily felt a twinge in her heart. Part of her wanted to yell, to scream, to shake him until he realized the damage his silence had caused. But she restrained herself. Instead, she looked at him steadily and said, "Because you never stood beside me. Your silence hurt me more than your mother ever could." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "She's my mother," he said almost pleadingly. "And I was your wife," Emily said softly. Her voice carried a quiet power he hadn't heard before. "Your silence made me invisible in my own home, and that is not acceptable." For a moment, Daniel's gaze dropped. He said nothing. Emily handed him the paperwork Laura had prepared. It detailed her rights, the boundaries she intended to set, and the legal steps she was taking to protect herself. "It was not a threat, it was a declaration. Read it," she said, "and know that I will not return to that house, not under these conditions. Not while silence is weaponized against me." Daniel's face paled as he read. Emily saw for the first time the weight of his inaction. He realized how his refusal to confront his mother had contributed to Emily. Suffering over the next few weeks, Emily focused on building her life. She moved into a small apartment close to her work as a nurse. She saved diligently, managed her schedule, and began to reclaim the freedom she had long denied herself. Maggie's influence no longer reached her. Yet, the emotional stakes were far from over. Maggie, enraged by Emily's departure, attempted to manipulate Daniel further. She pressured him to cancel his own appointments, stay home, and fix the marriage. Daniel's compliance wavered under the pressure, but Emily's steadfast boundaries held firm. One evening, Emily received a call from a neighbor still living in the Carter community. "Emily, you won't believe it," the woman said, voice hushed. "Your mother-in-law, she's losing everything. The house, Daniel's career, it's collapsing." Emily's chest tightened. Part of her wanted to feel satisfaction, perhaps even triumph, but she felt neither. Instead, she felt a quiet clarity. The consequences were not hers to rejoice over. She had survived. She had reclaimed herself. That was all that mattered. Flashbacks to her life with Maggie and Daniel came unbidden. She remembered the morning when Maggie first criticized her cooking, the evening she whispered about children she had even known Emily had lost, the countless times she had tried to speak to Daniel only to meet a wall of silence. Each memory was a dagger, but now, the dagger had lost its power. Emily's resolve strengthened. She realized something essential. The true weight of abuse isn't in loud arguments or physical violence, it's in the quiet, in the silence, in the approval by inaction. Daniel had been silent, yes, but she had found her voice. The day came when Emily received a notice from the bank and legal advisors. Maggie Carter's house and assets were being seized due to unpaid debts, poor financial decisions, and mismanagement decisions made while trying to control Daniel and Emily's lives. Daniel's silence and unwillingness to assert himself had contributed indirectly to the collapse. Emily sat on her balcony that evening, watching the city lights glow like scattered stars. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel revenge. She felt free. Free from judgment. Free from manipulation, free from the invisible chains that had once bound her life. She knew that the story wasn't about punishment, it was about reclamation. Maggie and Daniel would face the consequences of their actions, but Emily would rise above them, untethered and unafraid. And in the quiet, Emily allowed herself one thought: sometimes survival itself is the most profound revenge. Emily Carter sat in her small apartment, sunlight spilling through the blinds and reflecting on the months that had passed since she had walked out of the Carter family home. Life had changed dramatically. She had returned to the rhythm of her own life, work, friends, quiet weekends, and evenings spent reading or cooking for herself. There was a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years, And yet, she knew the real story was still unfolding back in the neighborhood she had left behind. It began with a phone call from an old neighbor, someone who had witnessed the chaos Emily had left behind. "Emily, you won't believe what's happening with the Carters," the woman whispered, excitement and disbelief mingling in her tone. Emily leaned back in her chair, her fingers tightening around the phone. "What is it?" she asked, calm but attentive. "Margaret, your mother-in-law, she's lost the house. Daniel's career, it's falling apart too. Everything they tried to control gone. It's like watching a slow-motion disaster." Emily exhaled slowly. A strange mix of relief and disbelief washed over her. She hadn't sought revenge, hadn't planned for this. Yet life had a way of balancing itself. Maggie's obsession with control, combined with Daniel's silence, had created their own downfall. Emily remembered every single moment leading to this: Maggie's judgment, her relentless criticism, the way she had dictated every part of Emily and Daniel's life. And Daniel who had been silent, watching while she suffered. Emily realized then that the collapse wasn't cruel fate, it was inevitable. The next day, Emily received a letter in the mail, a formal notification that Maggie Carter and Daniel had lost their home to foreclosure. Emily opened it carefully, though she had already anticipated the contents. It confirmed what the neighbor had told her: the house, the savings, and even Daniel's investments were gone. Every asset had been swallowed by debts accrued from Maggie's interference and poor management. Emily paused for a moment, thinking about the years she had endured. She had once imagined herself crying, screaming, or even retaliating, but now she felt none of that. She felt calm, free, powerful, not because she had orchestrated this, but because she had chosen herself. She had left before the destruction could touch her, and she had rebuilt her life without them. That evening, Emily decided to go for a walk. The streets were quiet, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the small city. As she passed familiar houses, she thought about Daniel. She had loved him once, truly, deeply, but she also understood now that love was not enough when paired with silence and avoidance. Daniel had failed her not because he had malice, but because he had allowed fear and passivity to dictate his life. He had allowed Maggie to dominate everything, to crush Emily's spirit, and he had done nothing. As she walked, her phone buzzed again. Another neighbor, this one a mutual friend, texted, "Daniel came by today looking for you. He said he's realized he made a mistake and wants to reconcile." Emily read the message and laughed softly, a laugh full of irony and finality. She typed back, "I hope he learns that silence has a cost. I've already paid mine. Now it's his turn." The days that followed confirmed the unraveling of the Carter family's carefully controlled world. Maggie tried to influence Daniel to restore her version of order, but Daniel could no longer comply. Her financial mismanagement had left him powerless, and her dominance over him had backfired spectacularly. Emily remained in her apartment, observing the news secondhand. Occasionally, she would hear updates from friends or neighbors. Daniel applying for jobs he had abandoned years ago to placate his mother. Maggie attempting to reclaim authority she no longer had, their social reputation in tatters after months of gossip about their mismanagement. And yet, Emily did not rejoice in their downfall. She only reflected, silently, on the truth she had learned over the year, that freedom and self-respect are the most potent forms of revenge. Then came the moment Emily had been waiting for, not for revenge, but for closure. Daniel called her, his voice trembling. "Emily, I didn't realize. I should have stood by you. I should have said something. Emily held the phone in her hand, looking out over the city lights, the quiet hum of life around her. She felt a calm she hadn't known before. "Daniel," she said slowly, deliberately, "silence costs people everything. I paid for it once. Now, it's your turn." He didn't respond immediately. She could hear his breathing, heavy and uncertain. "I'm not coming back," she continued. "I rebuilt my life while you watched. I'm happy now. You can only live with the consequences of your choices." She hung up. For the first time in years, Emily felt a profound peace. Her life was hers. Her dignity, her decisions, her happiness, untouched by Maggie, untouched by Daniel. She had survived the storm. And now, she could watch it from a distance without being drawn back into the chaos. Weeks later, she received confirmation that the Carter house had been sold at auction, and Maggie and Daniel were forced to downsize, move into a small apartment, and start over with little to nothing. For years, they had built a facade of control, superiority, and perfection. And in the end, it all crumbled because the foundation, Emily's dignity and Daniel's silence, had been ignored. Emily reflected on the journey. She remembered the mornings filled with criticism, the nights of quiet tears, suffocating atmosphere of the Carter house, and the constant pressure from Maggie. She realized something profound. The true power wasn't in fighting, in yelling, or in punishing. The true power was in leaving, surviving, and rebuilding. Emily had chosen herself. That choice had protected her, strengthened her, and, indirectly, allowed the natural course of justice to take its place. As she sipped her evening tea on the balcony, watching the lights of the city twinkle, she whispered quietly, "Silence destroys, but choosing your voice, that's unstoppable." And in that simple truth, Emily found her peace, her freedom, and the ultimate emotional victory.